All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time. We appreciate taking your Friday afternoon, your Friday morning, your Friday evening, wherever you are, to spend it with us. Coaches Across Continents is proud to be part of Qatar's Empower Leadership Program. We've got some experience in recent years, including one of our presenters today, Jamie, who participated in last year's conference. And I know that in person, and I know that Patty, our other presenter, was supposed to be our keynote speaker at this year's conference, and then a virus came and changed all of our plans. So I'm happy to present this short 1-hour presentation on self-directed learning, on purposeful play, but it's mostly about our coaching and our curriculum methodology. So without further ado, let's get going. I already did that introduction, but Empowering CAC, we're happy to be here. And we know that what Coaches Across Continents, one of the best things that we can offer, or one of our favorite things to offer, is our coaching methodology, but also our designing curriculum, how it can be adapted to any range of issues, including adapting to COVID-19. Quick introduction. My name is Charlie. I'm the CAC. I'm an impact team leader from Coaches Across Continents. I've been with CAC for the last 8 years, traveling and working with dozens and dozens of partners in 30 plus countries. And I'm very proud to be here. My role is actually as the curriculum team leader. So in curriculum creation, in distribution, in curriculum development, that is where my primary focus is, along with a lot of organizing on-field programs and running those sessions on the ground with some of the best people in the world, including some of my other presenters, including Patty Caceres, who I've met many times. Patty, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi everyone, I'm Patrina K.N. Caceres, but call me Patty or Coach Patty. And I am a football coach, a university instructor from the Philippines. So I have been connected with Coaches Across Continents since 2014 as one of the in their 2015 I became one of the community impact coaches with them, training teachers, football players, coaches in cities here in the Philippines and abroad in Indonesia in 2016, right? And I serve as one of the football coaches in an organization that catered in the beginning as a psychosocial therapy by towns. And eventually it became an academy. It's called Football for Life Academy. So basically, we teach football and life skills to these children and youth. So hi everyone, it's Coach Patty again. And we have Jamie on the other side of the world.
Where are you at, Jamie?
Hello, everybody. I am in England, nowhere quite as interesting as the Philippines or the USA. I'm currently on Potato Net, as I like to call it, where my internet is not very good, so I can't show my video, unfortunately. And if I cut out, just say in the chat, and I'll try and repeat what I was saying. But as Patty mentioned, my name is Jamie, and I've been involved with Coaches Across Continents since 2016. Firstly as a volunteer, and now fortunately for the last sort of year and a half as a staff member within our Instruct division. And to give you a little bit of a background, my main role is to deliver on-field programming, teaching our purposeful play and education outside of the classroom curriculums and methodology in countries around the world. I was fortunate that I could go to 15 countries last year and deliver 27 programs with our partners. Yeah, I'm nowhere near as interesting as the other two people on this call, so it's a little bit about me, and I'll hand it back to them.
How humble and Scottish. Love the accent. Moving right along. Coaches Across Continents, for those that don't know, is a global collaboration of large NGOs, of small NGOs, of corporate foundations, and we work with governments. And the idea is that purposeful play and education outside the classroom can be utilized no matter what setting you're in, no matter what community, in order to address different UN SDGs, to address social issue priorities, through the act of sport, through the act of play, through the act of games. What we actually do is, through these partnerships with other NGOs and other organizations, we help them either design their own curriculum, we help them with creating theories of change, with creating gender rights policy, with child rights policies, but we have 28 strategic resources that we offer to our partners year-round, and we are consultants that help them get from wherever they are to wherever they want to go. And it's always a conversation driven by the local needs, and very much it's never a CAC will jump into a place and tell them what to do, but we will listen and we will act on whatever priorities that the local partner sees. To give a quick map of the countries that our partners work in, pretty blue map. 6 continents. We're working on Antarctica. That's a bit of a joke, but also not, because I want to go. There's 111 some countries addressing almost every single UN SDG, and 17 million youth. So to kick off this webinar, we are all very aware in today's climate and culture that webinars can be successful. They can also be a little boring. And with that in mind, our idea for this one is to get as much engagement as possible, so it is not just Patty's, Jamie's, and my voice that you're going to hear all this time, or at least not all of our ideas. So with that said, I've got 2 questions for you. One of them I want you to think about and answer in a few words in the chat box. And that question is, when I say self-directed learning, what do you think of? What is self-directed learning to you? And while I let you think about that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about purposeful play. But the question to answer, what is self-directed learning? Take your time, but as that gets put into the chat box, I'm going to talk a little more about purposeful play, which is the idea that play by itself offers enormous opportunity for kids and for adults of any age to explore different spaces, to explore ideas, and learn based on what they bump into in that setting, in that context. And that's play in general. But purposeful play is the idea that facilitators or whoever's leading a session has the opportunity to guide a little bit, or to create a space with some specific outcomes where the kids are playing, the kids will, or whoever is playing, will explore that space, but then they will end up bumping into specific ideas, such as different child rights issues, such as different gender equality issues, or health issues. And these ideas can be used to provide a purpose behind the act of play itself, which adds an extra layer of education to the act. The idea is to slowly merge this purposeful play idea into what self-directed learning is, but I'm saying we don't have a ton of input, which is no problem at all. So I'm going to jump just right in that self-directed learning is learning from one's mistakes. Thank you, Nandini. Good to see you here. And Benny, I'm sure you're right next to her. I think learning from one's mistakes is 100% part of what self-directed learning is. But I also think that there's an element here of reshaping how a facilitator approaches education. There's an old model of the teacher standing up high and pouring knowledge into a pupil's head, and once they're full, they go on their way. And this idea that a teacher is the source of all knowledge, and that the child is the receptacle, or the receiving end, we feel that this is particularly outdated in facilitating self-reflective learning. Absolutely. So the idea that learning and education can take place as an individual navigating a space, navigating a problem on their own to an extent. Hassan, when you decide to learn something by yourself, by reading books, by surfing Wikipedia, watching videos, absolutely. So when you take that initiative as an individual to learn different things, this is self-directed learning in one of its purest senses. The way that coaches across continents tries to push into is that you can create self-directed learning opportunities and spaces for it through organized games, through organized sessions with either your team or your class or however you interact with kids. So self-directed learning is essentially the idea that if a child or if anyone wants to learn an issue, they have an opportunity to take some responsibility, as Tarek says, but to grow and to learn about that issue on their own through a general structure that the facilitator can provide. So instead of providing all of the answers that each kid should always know, it's creating a game where a kid can learn different aspects of a problem by playing the game itself and then contributing to the shape of the game. And a lot of that talk maybe makes sense right now, but it's essentially what we're going to focus on the rest of this session. So we'll keep getting into it. To give a couple examples, before we jump straight forward, I wanted to give a general idea that we're going to provide 4 CAC classic games. Some of you I recognize names and you might already know, but some of you might not. And Patty, I think, is going to take the first couple games, and then Jamie, and then we have a fun challenge for this entire group to create their own game. Alrighty, Miss Patty, would you like to jump in and explain what Lines game is and how it's connected to self-directed learning?
Yeah, so the first game that we're going to discuss is one of the, well, technically it's supposed to be easy, but then when competition, it becomes confusing. So this game is composed of 2 teams, and for each team there should be an almost equal number of players, and for each team, and from the name itself, they will be in lines game. Each line will have a corresponding number. It starts when the coach says 2 numbers, and these numbers have to switch places. Easy, right? So if the coach calls out 1 and 2, the lines 1 and 2 will switch places. If the coach calls out 1 and 4, then lines 1 and 4 will switch. The confusing part now becomes when the coach says 2 numbers faster, and players can get confused whether they still, if they started as line 1, will they still be line 1 even if they aren't in the first line per se? Can you see the picture of how it can be a bit confusing? So do you remain line 1 even if you are in number 4's position? So each group has to solve the problem, and the problem is whether the coach means you still having the same number, or is the position of the line supposed to still be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? Do you understand it? Do you understand what I mean? Basically, problems like confusion happen, and the teams have to strategize as to how they're going to solve the problem. Eventually, if the coach sees that they don't understand the instructions, that's when he in the line. Like if you are line one from the very beginning, you will be line one until the end. So they have to strategize. And I have a question as to whether me telling a group, hey, raise your so that we won't get confused. Is that self-directed learning or is it coach solving the problem? It says my internet is not connected. Hello? Can you hear me? Charlie?
Yeah, we can hear you. Bye. Keep going. You're doing well. Okay, cool. So while we're waiting on Patty, maybe fixing her internet issues, I'll just ask you guys to see what your thoughts are on the question that Patty mentioned. Do you think that instructing people in this game where they need to go, or letting them solve? What do you think? Letting them solve the problem themselves. Exactly. So, at a very basic level, self-directed learning is encouraging people to solve their own problems. And in this game, where there's a little bit of chaos, things almost always, every time I've coached this game, at the beginning, it goes wrong. But then you give them time and space to work out some tactics or strategies that they can start to solve their own problems. And then you link this back to how they can solve their own problems in life. Charlie, do you want to move on to the next game? Beautiful. Indonesia for attitudes. So this game, as you can see in the diagram, has 4 squares. Okay, and the theme of this game that we've chosen is gender, social norms, or choices. And very quickly to run through, each team is in 1 square. Each team comes up with a word to describe a man. Now, we didn't pick these words. These are the 4 words that typically come up all around the world, everywhere, even in the UK or America or wherever, that people use to describe a man. So strong, handsome, and rich and loud, because you know how men like to talk so positively about themselves. Um, Anyway, so these people describe these 4 words for a man, and then it becomes a little game where you can either play this with hand and netball or football. And each team tries to bring the ball to a stop in the opponent's square. They pick up the ball and they shout strong. So, for example, in this game, in this diagram, it's rich versus strong. Rich try to get the ball into the strong box, and then they swap over and they take over a different box. Then typically what we do is we'd ask the group to give us 4 words to describe a woman. Okay, and just out of curiosity, people who are in the chat, what are some words that you would use to describe a woman or a lady or a female? Anything you want. First word that comes to your mind when we say describe a woman or describe a lady. Mm-hmm.
Jamie, what are some
No
other
rush.
words to describe a man as? Well, they answer the women's side.
It depends if they're asking to describe me.
Well, how would you describe yourself while we wait for them to put in a few things?
Probably dashing, charming, Scottish.
The most.
Oh, I'm a multitasker, Nandini. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Nandini's talking about women here. She's responding to our question. She's not commenting.
Yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah, that's probably true. Okay, so women are typically multitaskers. We assume. What else? When we think of a woman or a lady, what are some other terms or words that we use? Nandini, you've met me, so I'm looking for big words here from me too.
I think that there's bound to be an enormous amount of words. Oh, gentle and kind. Classic. Jamie, you can continue. I was just trying to stall some more. They fight for rights. I'm not able to hear Jamie anymore, so I'm hoping that you can still hear my voice. Mm-hmm. Oh, this platform. Okay, thank you, Adam. So I'm just going to continue then. The idea here is you play this first round of games. You play it based on the different norms, and you ask the participants for characteristics of men, but then you bring, after a few rounds, them back together, and you ask for characteristics of women. And so we've gotten some good ideas here that women should be gentle and kind, that they're confident, that they fight for rights. They're usually against wars and against conflict. So these are all characteristics of women that maybe stand out. And instead of being a facilitator, being a coach who says this is correct and this is incorrect, what our role as a facilitator is to bring out these ideas and then to ask them why. So why do you think the first word associated with a man is strong? And then why is so often the words associated with women supposed to be gentle or kind or beautiful? And instead of giving a you are correct answer, you are incorrect answer, it becomes a conversation that the children, the participants, bring out from their own experience. So it's a reflection on where do these ideas come from. Maybe it's from something they've seen on TV, maybe it's from their friends or how they see it in their family. But the idea that these ideas are not, they're not necessarily fixed.
I'm back, Charlie.
Great, you're back. I think that we've got a question from Salah regarding the economy in sub-Arab countries do not allow participation in art and sports. And then the question is, what are the programs for reviving the economy of these countries? I think that it is an incredibly nuanced question, but when you talk about reviving the economy, I think that that's a little bit out of the purview of what we're focusing on right now. So Salah, if you're able to maybe narrow down or qualify the question a little bit, it would be helpful. Mm-hmm. And then Aldrin's talking about mutualism and rebuilding trust between men and women and how it's needed with sports and peace. I think that these are important points and they deserve a lot more attention. And unfortunately, we are a little short on time. So we're going to return to these, I hope, at the end of this conversation. But Jamie, the next game, I believe, is yours.
Yep. So exercise and isolation, which is very pertinent to the time. Very quickly, the theme is all about strength and healthy bodies and balance. It's just typically a game you'd maybe use as a warm-up.
Jamie's audio has kicked out again, which means I'm jumping right back in. I apologize for all the technical difficulties, guys. I think we're doing as well as we are able at the moment, but I appreciate your patience. Third game. So we're trying to give you examples of different CAC games in order to get to the final stage of this webinar. In this particular game, great. If you can hear Jamie, I'll be quiet. Apologies.
Oh, right. You can hear me. Perfect. Again, as Charlie mentioned, apologies for these technical issues. But exercise in isolation, strength, healthy body's balance, blah. Typically a game that you'd use as a warm-up if you were playing with your players. But very, very quickly, the players are spread out, and as you can see in the diagram, the player is standing on 0. And number 1 to the front left, number 2 to the front right, number 3 to the back left, and number 4 to the back right. Okay, so I would normally shout as the coach, number 1, and then the players would all jump to begin with to square number 1. And then I would say 0, and they would jump back to square 0. Number 3, etc. They would jump to 3. I would say 4, they would jump to 4. And then 2, they would jump to 2. And then we would change the movement. So we jumped at first. Now we might ask the players to walk or to run or to hop or to stretch and touch with their hands on these squares. And you would shout 1, 2, 3, 1 to try and catch them out and confuse them, etc. As you can see in the sample discussion questions, we're asking our participants mostly about physical things. Just a quick question for the chat though. Instead of naming these boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, what are some other topics we could discuss using this game and rename the boxes? So if we wanted to use this game to teach about different subjects, what else could we use those boxes to talk about? Hopefully you can all still see that diagram because it's disappeared on my screen. Beautiful. Is Charlie and Patty here, or?
I'm here. I hear you.
Beautiful. Do you have a different way to describe what I'm trying to ask? Make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I think you're asking if we could adapt this to a different instead of just numbers.
Yeah.
If there was a different topic that you wanted to talk about, does it have to be numbers or could it be learning about a different something else in the current?
In the current COVID situation, we can name each for a good choice we to make. Brilliant. Beautiful, Nandini. Have you got any suggestions of what that could be? What does that look like in your head? What are the different choices that we could change this to? Oh, I hear a Katrina. Are we back in business?
I'm back. I'm back from the dead. But yeah, Nandini, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I'm conscious of time though, so Nandini, if you have any suggestions, please put them in the chat box. But I think we'll move on to the last game, Charlie. Katrina, do you want to describe this one, or do you want me to do it?
Which one? Oh, the next one. Maybe I can do it.
Go for it, please do.
So
Go.
I can redeem myself. Redeem myself. Okay. What's this again? No. So the name is Balak Goes to Goal, and Balak is a football player. And that's the nice thing about the curriculum. They use models like Ronaldo to teach skills, Marta, Hope Solo to teach goalkeeping skills. This one particularly it's actually more in competition because you're playing. So good choices to protect yourself. This one is a game that tackles on the topic of protection from HIV, sexually transmitted infections or STIs like gonorrhea, syphilis, and the like. Also, unwanted pregnancies. So the skill that is taught here is quick thinking and basically football as well. So there are three goals, and each of these represent a way to protect yourself from sexually transmitted diseases. So when you play this game, you ask the participants, what how can you protect yourself from STIs, STDs, HIV, and then they'll answer. Maybe some of them will answer, oh, abstain, use condoms, mm, all the other ideas that you have. And then each team has numbered players. When the coach calls out three, for example, three versus the three on the other team will play a football game, and the coach will call out the coach will sorry about that the coach will call out the choice or the decision. If the coach says say no, you try to score a goal and say no. So I have a question: how can you adapt this game to especially certain topics that are relevant to your communities, like any particular ideas from the group?
So we're getting communication that some people can hear certain voices, but they cannot hear other people's voices. And some people can see the screen and others cannot see the screen, which is a frustrating problem. So I really appreciate all of your patience. I believe that Jamie is on and would be able to continue, but if not, I'm hoping you can hear my voice now.
And yeah,
I'm
for
back
those who
if you
can't
can hear me.
see, sorry, for those who can't see Charlie's screen, try to check if you can. I'm going to share my screen. Be on the same page as Charlie is on. Let's try that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. While you're doing that then, Patty, I'm just going to continue. Will I just do this next bit, Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So hopefully you can hear me. Please let me know in the chat if you can, or if it doesn't sound great. But Patty and I and Charlie have just gave you 4 examples of games that we typically play at coaches across continents. We had Lines game, which was game A, Indonesia for Attitudes, which is game B, car or a Hoover or something. Exercise in isolation, which was game C, and Balak goes to goal, which was game D. So what we'd like you to do in the chat, please pick your favorite game. So whether you liked Lions game, you would put in the chat A. If you liked Indonesia for Attitudes, you would put B. If you liked Exercise and Isolation, you would put C. And if Balak goes to goal was your favorite game, you would put D in the chat. And what we're going to do is we're going to take whatever gets the most votes, and we're going to work to create a completely new game, and with different messages and questions. So as quick as you can, whenever you're ready, please pick game A, game B, game C, or game D. There is no immediate rush. While we are waiting, though, I have a question for my co-presenters on which is their favorite game. Charlie, what's your favorite game out of these?
I'm going to probably say line game, but I also know that we have quite a number of questions from the chat box that unfortunately we don't have time to get to all of them, but some of them, Ekramia was asking for how you can make activities for students related to sport inside the class. And I think it's a great question. Many times we have all these games that you can play on a field, and there are ways to adapt them to a classroom setting. By introducing more limitations in terms of walking, in terms of spacing, but the curriculum design to use sport types methodology within a classroom is certainly possible, but the idea is to adapt existing sport games into a smaller setting, into a less dangerous setting, so that they do not have to be outside running around in circles.
Okay, sweet. So we have 2 votes for Game A line game so far. Anyone else want to take a vote? Nandini and Benny, I thought you would have went for Game D. I mean, Game D is the champion of those games, but I can deal with it. Patty, what's your favourite game out of those 4 games?
For me, because when you facilitate,
What's with all the lines game, folks?
it's really fun.
All right, then I think we have a winner.
Especially at times when you don't say anything, like you use your fingers to show the numbers, and then the players will be will be like, what's happening? Why isn't she saying anything? And then when they realize it, oh, now she's raising her fingers, her hand to show the numbers. It's like you can play it in many ways. It's really, you can see which of the participants are the ones who are the natural leaders, basically, and the ones who are creative. Yeah, it's always fun to do that.
Good shout. So, Charlie, I think Game A wins. So I'm going to bat it back to you to move on to the next part, but we'll take Game A. Are you there, Charlie?
Yep, I clicked it on my screen, so it shows that we're on the next slide. But if it does not show that for you, that is a problem.
Yep. No, it does. It does. You're good to go.
Okay, I think that you can hear me, I hope. The idea here is we picked the first game, Game A, and now, as the group, what we're going to do is adapt this game to a different social message. The way it was originally was more of a problem-solving conflict game, and now the question that you need to put into the poll is which game is which UN SDG target, which UN SDG goal would you like to change this game into? And we've given just a few examples, either 4, 5, or 10. And if you would rather focus on a different UN SDG, you can put in a different one. So wait for a little bit of that before we continue. It's a little difficult to read. UN SDG number 4 is about quality education. UN SDG number 5 is about gender equality. And while UN SDG number 10 is about reducing inequalities across the board. So this includes inequalities between economic status. It includes inequalities between races, between any type of disparity between 2 groups. UN SDG 10's aim is to reduce those by 2030. Hossam, that's a very interesting question. I'm wondering if you could. It's more fun and peaceful to insert sport with education, but did we control the students to be able? Do we control the kids to be able to understand peace by it? I think I understand your question, but the general framework for when you insert education into sport, which is essentially what we're talking about in this webinar, it's not really a question of controlling the students as much as it is by the message you insert within a game it can vary depending on your role as the facilitator. So you could insert a message to focus on understanding peace and conflict, or you could insert a message to focus on something else. So, if you're able to clarify your question, I might be able to answer it a little more thoroughly. But right now, what I'm waiting for is to decide if we are going to adapt game A to UNSDG number 4, to UNSDG number 5, or UNSDG number 10. Jamie, what's your favorite UNSDG?
Personally, to me, 5 is quite important.
All right.
To the work that we do, obviously, as you can maybe tell in the chat from my accent, I'm from Scotland, and before CC, I worked with a Scottish youth organisation, and UNSDG 5 is the one that we focused quite prominently on.
Fair enough. Patty, what about you?
As can bring you places, like you can achieve your other goals as long as you learn, as long as you get the quality education that you deserve, the kind of education that makes you ready to face the world. Like I've always told my students that no matter how difficult your life circumstances are, when you study and at least hopefully get a degree anywhere in the world you are at, you'll be able to stand up, like you'll be able to be independent. You'd have that with you for the rest of your life. My mom always told me that she never got, well, they didn't have enough money, so she had to work her way through school. And I didn't, even if I didn't do that, like I had the means to study, I still valued education because it's your ticket to contributing to your country. So yeah, I always tell my players, you can be the best player, but if you're not a good student, there's a gap between your self and the things that you valued
Fair enough.
the most. And I thank you. Just like a beauty cream. Yeah.
All right. I think we're pushing towards the end of the time limit here, so we're gonna jump in because Jamie's favorite UNSDG was goal number 5. We're gonna focus on gender equality, and we're going to adapt the game that we chose, which was game A, into UNSDG number 5. Oh, and look at that, Nandini agrees. All right. To adapt a game, there's a couple ways you can shift the message, or you can shift the structure of the game. And the simplest way, I think, to change game A, which was Lions game, so you can see Lions game, and Patty or Jamie, I think one of you should mute your microphone. That would help. Lions game, if we wanted to adapt it to focus on gender equality, the first step to this conversation. Patty, can you mute your microphone?
I didn't hear anything. I didn't quite get what. Oh, okay.
Okay. Appreciate your patience, everyone. Lions game. Originally, it's a problem-solving game. If groups 1 and 2 switch places, then you say different numbers progressively faster, and the team needs to come up with strategies in order to successfully switch with the appropriate group. Instead of just using numbers, it's incredibly simple to change the label of each line of people to something else. And one trap that many facilitators fall into is just telling each group what their line will represent and having those answers come from the coach themselves. So instead, gathering the team together, asking the group, all right, if we want to talk about gender inequality, maybe it's what are 5 or 4 different reasons that gender inequality exists in your community. And it becomes a bit of a conversation where the responses that the participants give become the labels of the lines that they then stand in. So it's not coming directly from the coach, but coming from the participants themselves. You can play the game where instead of saying 1 and 2, maybe one of the reasons that some women have a little bit less opportunity would deal with talking about education, the priority of men more than women in some parts of the world, addressing education, or talking about sports opportunities or job employment. And it does not need to be a conversation about something being the correct way or the right way, because that's not our job, but having a conversation about what the children see in their home community. This is a game, you could adapt it to something serious, talking about gender rights. You could also adapt it depending on the setting of any other topic in the world. So one of the questions was shifting a sports game to something in the classroom. This game could do that. Instead of numbers, you could talk about colors if you have very young children. If you're learning about geography, it could be the different cities within a certain state, or the different countries in a certain continent, or the branches of government, or any topic that you want to talk about. If you have a game that uses labeled numbers and groups or labeled areas, all it takes is a shift in the wording to create a space for those types of conversations to come out. I know that we've had a bit of a struggle through our technical difficulties here, but the general idea is that by adapting games yourself, instead of only playing the same games you always play, you can explore different ways to use sport to address whatever social priorities you care about. If you care about the environment, the same game we just played could be different tactics to address environmental issues. Now, Roxana has an incredible question. What tools or actions should be instilled in young people so that they provoke What tools or actions should be instilled in young people so that they provoke rivalry or aggression? And how can we work to promote peace and say that it is a sport of inclusion and learning? I think I'm understanding it correctly. And it is unfortunate that a lot of sport is built off this idea of competition and winning and aggressiveness and fighting each other to become victorious. There is a space and there is a time for that type of energy. But I think that as the facilitator, one of the best ways to address this is in redefining success, in redefining winning with your students or with your children. So if you want to work to promote peace and inclusion, instead of celebrating the goal, instead of celebrating scoring and winning the game, as the facilitator, you can celebrate and give more attention to actions and to decisions during practice and during games that are more inclusion based. So maybe scoring a goal is awesome, but instead of cheering them on the most, you focus on the particular players or students who are helping set up the field, who are helping in the game create a stronger atmosphere of inclusion. And so it's honestly a question of shifting priority away from winning, away from being the top of the class, towards building an atmosphere for each other. Jamie, I believe you're back, and I think we could close it out with, I think you have a point about Balak, and then we have a little social media challenge at the end that I believe you're on.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, beautiful. So if you could just go back to, I think it was game D. Roxana, I think this is kind of sort of along the lines of what you're talking about when you're talking about like aggression and sport and different rivalries. So if you take a look at this game, this is your typical football game where there are goals and points to be scored. And normally it would be whoever scores the most points win. But if you look at this game, what we've done is we've focused on sexual health, and the goals have a different meaning. So the goal on the left is say no, and it's the other goal is a condom, and then the other goal is tested together. And the whole point, to quickly summarize, is not the scoring the goal is the important part. It's the remembering what the goals mean and why they're important. Okay, so as Charlie touched on, it's redefining winning. And there are many different ways that you can play this game and other types of games that seem like they're typical football games, but actually it's not about scoring points. We change what the points and the goals mean. And that kind of takes away the competitive aspect and makes it more a sort of fun and educational learning environment, which in turn makes it a little bit more peaceful and less competitive. But I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of an example of how we at CEC try to redefine winning.
The last part that I think I want to just focus on as the facilitator, I've tried to push home that it's the questions that you ask when you're working with participants that bring out real content that helps them engage, that helps them understand. And oftentimes it's easy to ask a question where the answer is yes, and you'll see all the children nod their head saying yes, or they'll say no because they anticipate the correct answer and they're giving the facilitator what the facilitator wants. So the types of questions that you ask are incredibly important. And if the answer is a single word, the question could be better. And so one way to practice that is to think through the games whenever you have a session coming up, but to think through ahead of time and prepare a few questions that you think the conversation could lead to. Oftentimes the conversation will go in a different direction because kids are crazy and fun, and they might think of something entirely different. And it's our job to be ready to adapt and to facilitate, but to certainly have a level of preparedness ahead of time. Jamie, I think we're wrapping up, and we would certainly we would appreciate any reflections or any comments, but I know that Jamie also has a very small social media challenge that we could close on and we could finish it up here.
Yeah, sweet. So I hope that you have all enjoyed and taken something away from this workshop or webinar, whatever you want to call it. I apologize again for the technical issues that we've experienced, but the whole purpose of this webinar was to give you a little bit of an insight on how coaches across continents, first of all, create games and how we interlink those educational messages, how we redefine winning, as we just touched on, Roxana, but also how we adapt games to different messages. It's not just very quickly like we don't go into communities and we tell them, oh, your community needs to fix this. We provide community leaders all around the world with the tools to be able to play games and solve the issues that matter most to them. And what we were trying to evidence there is that we can take any game, and you guys can take any game and change it and transform it to suit you and your community's needs. So what we'd like you to do, if you have time or if you are interested, is to have a look at the games that we've discussed. See if you can change any, if you have any ideas on how to adapt them to maybe different UN SDGs, or maybe even change the game completely and draw it up and stick it on social media. and send it to us, because we're always open to ideas, and we love hearing the thoughts of different people and how they create these games, because although we are experienced at this, there are always people who have different ideas and views to us. So if you create a game and then stick it on social media and tag us, we're at, is it at Coaches Across, Charlie? Yeah, I think we're
I
at
think so.
Coaches
And
Across
there's
on
also
Twitter and Instagram.
We will send a copy, the version of this webinar, along with the game that we adapted really quickly to focus on gender equity, along with social media links. So all of that information will be provided if you've signed up as a participant on this webinar.
Yeah, beautiful. And Nandini VJ Kumar, I don't think we've ever met, but you seem to know a lot about our game. So if you want to take part in this challenge, then please feel free to, and anybody else. But yeah, so that's the social media challenge. Feel free to take part. And as Charlie mentioned, we'll be sending out all of these slides and this content and the game that we create over the next day or so.
Thank you all for your time. Roxana, I know you tried to clarify your question at the last second there. Essentially, it becomes, in my view, the focus that the coach gives, the focus that the facilitator puts on winning at all costs is generally a primary source for a lot of this aggression, and provoking this rivalry comes from the idea that I need to win. And if you redefine winning as a group, as a class, or as a team, that attitude tends to slip away. It is not the answer for everything, but it is a step towards promoting a stronger environment of peace. And we could talk about this forever, and I really wish we could, but I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this webinar, and I hope that you stay safe and have a good weekend.
We hope you enjoyed your second Virtual Empower workshop. Once again, we'd like to say a sincere thank you to the workshop facilitators and to you for your ongoing participation and commitment throughout our first Virtual Empower 2020. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of day 3. Tomorrow comes with more interesting topics and specialized speakers. Keep checking the conference agenda for any updates, and don't forget to keep using the hashtag Empower2020. Please join us in the webinar room tomorrow, and we are looking forward to seeing you again. Peace.